Today, we're going to dive into a legal battle that all came down to one really painful question. Can a law actually disinherit you from your own family? It's the story of how one person's fight for what was hers ended up tearing down a legal iron curtain that had separated Filipino families for generations. I mean, just think about that for a second. Could a piece of paper, a law written ages ago, legally cut the tie between you and your grandparents? All because of your parents' marital status? Well, for a very long time in the Philippines, the answer was, unbelievably, yes. So what exactly was this barrier? It was a rule so harsh, so absolute, that even the courts gave it this kind of chilling name, an iron curtain that fell right down the middle of a family. Okay, so the rule itself was baked into Article 992 of the Civil Code, and it was pretty brutal. It said that if your parents weren't married, this legal wall, this iron curtain, crashes down, and it cuts you off. Not just from your grandparents, but from aunts, uncles, basically your entire extended family on that side. No inheritance rights, period. And when you see it side by side, the difference it created is just stark. Let's say your grandparent passes away. If your parent was married, you could step into their shoes and inherit their share. Simple. But if your parent was not married, that iron curtain slams shut. You get nothing. The law literally created two classes of grandchildren. So who would have the courage to actually take on a rule like this? Well, this is where the law becomes a really human story. And it's all about one granddaughter's fight for her place in the family. So meet Amadea Angela Aquino. She comes forward with a pretty straightforward claim. She's the granddaughter of the very wealthy Miguel T. Aquino. All she wanted was to be recognized as his heir and to claim the inheritance that would have gone to her father, Arturo, who had already passed away. But here's where Angela's story gets really complicated. Her father, Arturo, tragically died in January of 1978. Angela herself was born 9 months later. So her parents had planned to get married, but they never got the chance. Fast forward years later, her grandfather, Miguel, dies without a will. And he doesn't just leave behind a fortune, he leaves behind a total legal minefield. So Angela argued, look, my parents may not have been married, but I am absolutely part of this family. And she brought the receipts. She had evidence that her own grandfather, Miguel, had supported her mother through the pregnancy. She literally grew up in the family's home. Her own uncle was her godfather. For all intents and purposes, the Aquino clan treated her as one of their own. But what seemed pretty clear emotionally turned into an absolute legal nightmare. You see, family acceptance wasn't enough to convince the courts, and Angela's case started this long, painful journey through the system. And it was a total legal roller coaster. First up, the trial court actually sided with her. They said, yes, she's an acknowledged natural child. She can inherit. A win. But then the Court of Appeals comes in and completely reverses it. They said, one, she hadn't proven she was her father's daughter, and two, even if she did, that iron curtain from Article 992 was absolute, a hard no. So now you've got two lower courts saying the exact opposite, which means the case had only one place left to go, the Supreme Court. Now, this wasn't just another appeal. The Supreme Court saw something bigger here. They saw a chance to finally confront a legal idea that had been causing problems and heartache for decades. And this part is so crucial. The court didn't just focus on the details of Angela's life. They decided to put the law itself on trial. They zoomed way out to look at the whole idea behind the Iron Curtain Rule and asked a really basic question. In this day and age, does this rule even make sense anymore? So why the change of heart? Well, the court laid out three really powerful reasons. First, they called the old assumptions totally outdated. The law basically assumed that the legitimate family would always hate the illegitimate child. And the court said, hey, that's not how modern families work. Second, they put the best interest of the child front and center. And finally, they pointed out this bizarre legal loophole where, under the old rules, some non-marital children actually had more rights than others. It was just a mess. And they didn't hold back. In a really powerful line from the decision, the court said it would no longer uncritically parrot archaic prejudices and cruelties. That's basically them saying, our job is to deliver justice, not to keep old harmful stigmas alive. Wow. So what was the result? It was monumental. The court created a brand new reality. From now on, a child's right to inherit from their grandparents has nothing to do with whether their parents were married. The Iron Curtain was finally torn down. So how'd they do it?
It's pretty clever. They didn't have to write a new law. Instead, they found the solution already hiding in the Civil Code, Article 982. This article just says, grandchildren shall inherit. That's it. And the court pointed out, hey, that language doesn't make any distinction about legitimacy. A grandchild is a grandchild. So they ruled that this more inclusive article is the one that should apply, totally bypassing that old Iron Curtain.
So, what did all this actually mean for Angela in the end? And more importantly, what's the lasting impact of this incredible legal showdown? Well, for Angela, the Supreme Court decision was a huge, huge victory. But it wasn't the final buzzer. She won the right to inherit. The court then sent her case back down to the trial court so she could formally prove that Arturo was in fact her dad. And that, of course, opened the door for modern tools like DNA testing to finally settle it once and for all. When you step back, the legacy of this case, Aquino v. Aquino, is just profound. It knocked down a legal wall that had stood between grandparents and their own grandchildren for far too long. It sent a clear message that a child's rights should never be defined by their parents' relationship status. And ultimately, it helped drag Philippine law into the 21st century with a much more modern and compassionate idea of what really makes a family. This whole case leaves us with a really important question to chew on, doesn't it? The definition of family is always changing, always evolving, so the challenge for all of us is to make sure our laws don't just keep up, but that they actually lead the way with fairness and with heart.